Alright, so here's my evaluation project for CET 720. The EdTech tool that I chose to evaluate is called Slack. So Slack, what it is, it's a kind of an email, kind of a messaging based thing, and the goal of using the tool is to improve communication. My approach, who's using the tool would be sports coaches, strength coaches, athletic trainers, and student athletes, and the goal would be to improve communication from coach to trainer, coach to coach, coach to player, player to player, and also player to trainers, so that, for example, we know exactly what's going on at all times with our athletes, really help optimize performance and optimize those communication, those modes of communication, right? Another thing about the approach that I chose to use was a pre-test, post-test type layout, where I would use a survey to kind of gauge the attitudes towards how they would rate communication based on the scale from 1 to 10 before the tool, and then I would implement the tool for a few months or a semester, and then decide at the end to survey them again, the trainers, coaches, and athletes, and ask them again the same exact survey: how did they feel after? What are their attitudes towards communication after the tool Slack was implemented? So for this next section, this kind of just goes back to what I was saying. So again, the tool is Slack. My research question is here: does Slack increase the amount of communication as measured by a survey among coaches and athletes compared to their previous amount of communication? So for this tool, ideally what I wanted to measure was the attitude towards it. I couldn't really develop a tangible way of putting that. The tool wants to use the words increase or decrease, so I kind of tailored my question to that. So instead of measuring the attitudes, I decided to measure the amount for the sake of this project. So how will I use the results? So first, Slack has a free program. There's also a paid option, which would offer more features. The goal is to increase the amount of communication. I'd be measuring it, like I said, through a survey. I would measure the activity levels. I guess how many times you would get notifications of who's posting and who's sharing things. And the way that I would consider that whether or not Slack moved the needle, improved or didn't improve, was whether or not there was a 10% increase or 10% probability that communication was improved, 5 or more activity levels, so at least once a day per week. And if it found that the amount of communication was increased, then I would continue to use it, and if not, I would stop using Slack. So here's kind of just the demographic information. It's an information management tool. Like I said, it's a software program designed to improve communication within teams. Key component: a channel feature to organize team members into groups. The developer recommends using Slack as a replacement to traditional email. Like I said, at least once per day, improving activity levels to 5. I would implement it to, now I would say in small groups, as in teams. To whole classes, I would say like position groups, or different sports. Individually would be player to player, or each coach would have their own. Again, it's a behavior measurement. And then here's just demographics that I kind of guesstimated as far as what the demographics are at Dakota State. So here's a summary of the findings based on all the information and then the data that I made up. It shows that Slack is not moving the needle based on that 10% measurement, and that 5 or more activity levels among communication. But it also says that there's a 74% probability that Slack increases the amount of communication by more than 0 activity levels. So I'm not sure where exactly I went wrong there. Ideally, like I said, I would want to implement the technology for all groups. I didn't find a way to where I can do a pre-test, post-test based on attitudes instead of amount. So I divided it into treatment and comparison. I guess I could implement the tool with some teams and see if that moves the needle, if that improves communication while other teams don't, and see how what their attitudes are before and after. And so here's the basics of the tool. Here's the data that I made up and the demographics of the school. The evaluation period would be typically around a semester, so I scheduled it for the next fall semester. And that's the end of my evaluation.